At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's Chikondi. Let's begin. The meeting room on the lower levels of the Galactic Council was unremarkable. Yet it was there, during the space-borne equivalent of a late weekend hour, that Ambassador Izerp and two technicians were about to meet humanity for a secret mediation, just days before full war could be declared by Izerp's people. Izerp had agreed to be here only because of a nagging feeling that his government had been exaggerating the narrative of humans as cowards, based just on humanity's incessant attempts to avoid war, something he and the technicians were about to confront directly for the first time. The door slid open roughly, and Izerp stepped through, flanks marked by the presence of Laherp and Trodap just behind him. The three Vlorb moved quickly despite their aquatic ancestry, though they had walked on land for millennia. Izerp's green skin, mottled with distinctive black dots that marked him as a southern coastal native, projected an illusion of wetness, just an effect. The proto-gills on his neck, vestigial remnants that no longer served any function, fluttered as he drew breath, an unconscious response to tension. The human was already there. He sat alone at the far side of the unremarkable polymer table, his posture upright but not rigid, his expression carved from stone. The Vlorb delegation paused collectively, taking in this first direct encounter with their potential enemy. Humans were, Izerp noted with some surprise, not entirely dissimilar to his own people in basic structure, bipedal, bilateral symmetry, forward-facing eyes. Yet where the Vlorb bore the marks of the ocean depths, humans carried the stamp of terrestrial evolution. Dry skin, no visible gills, and a face that somehow managed to convey several expressions. "I didn't think you would show up," the human said, breaking the silence. His voice was lower than Izerp expected, rougher. Ambassador Izerp's facial chromatophores darkened a bit, a flicker of uncertainty he couldn't quite suppress. He exchanged a glance with Laherp, whose technical expertise had been invaluable in analyzing human transmissions, and with Trodap, whose eyes widened fractionally in what Izerp recognized as nervous anticipation.
"We have concerns that require elucidation,"
Izerp said carefully.
"Questions that cannot be answered through conventional channels."
The three Vlorb moved as one, their flowing ceremonial robes swishing around their legs. Izerp gathered his robe, lifting the hem to prevent it from catching on his feet as he approached the table. Laherp and Trodap did the same, the synchronized motion speaking to years of formal training. They took their seats across from the human ambassador, the unremarkable table now serving as a barrier between species that might soon be at war. The human watched them settle with those peculiar eyes, fixed pupils that gave away nothing. Izerp felt the weight of that gaze and wondered what intelligence moved behind it. The silence stretched between them. Izerp could hear only the soft breathing of his technicians and the beating of his own heart. The human remained motionless, his hands folded on the table before him, waiting with a patience that felt almost predatory. The human ambassador finally moved, leaning back in his chair. "Let me check if I got this right," he said, his tone conversational but his eyes sharp. "Your people are about to declare war on Earth. Your High Council is interpreting our diplomatic efforts as displays of cowardice, and this is only making the voices in favor of war even louder. Have I understood the situation correctly?" Izerp felt his chromatophores pulse once, surprised at the human's directness. He had expected more circling, more diplomatic dance. Humans, it seemed, preferred to cut straight to the arterial vein.
"Your understanding is accurate,"
Izerp admitted. He drew a slow breath, choosing his words with care.
"The High Council convenes in 3 days. The war faction has been gaining momentum for the past 2 orbital cycles. Every attempt your people have made to negotiate, every concession offered, Every diplomatic overture extended, all of it has been interpreted as weakness.
Who are the main voices pushing for war? The human asked.
The warlords of the Crimson Reaches hold considerable sway,
Irzerp explained, his voice taking on the analytical tone he used when briefing his superiors.
They are led by Zax, representative of the Warriors of the North, a decorated combat veteran with 12 successful campaigns to his name. He has the support of the military establishment and the colonial governors.
Irzerp paused, his facial patterns darkening as he continued.
Then there is High Counselor Blarier. He is not a warrior by tradition, but he understands power. He has built a coalition of industrial interests, resource extraction magnates, and advocates of colonial expansion. They see war with humanity as an opportunity, a chance to claim your territories and resources, and to increase our status as a warrior species in the Galactic Council.
How certain is the declaration? The human pressed.
Certain,
Irzerp said flatly.
I have seen the preliminary vote counts.
He paused, his gills fluttering with what might have been embarrassment.
The Council believes that humanity will capitulate rather than fight.
The human ambassador's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something that made Irzerp's ancestral instincts whisper warnings. The human stood slowly, moving toward a small refrigeration unit built into the wall. So, the human said, retrieving a bottle of water. I don't know how to tell you this, but here's what your people are getting fundamentally wrong. He turned, holding the bottle loosely in one hand. Humanity isn't trying to avoid war because we're afraid of you. We're trying to avoid war to protect you. Lahirp's face went through a rapid series of color shifts, confusion, disbelief, and something close to offense. Trodap actually laughed, a barking sound that echoed in the small room. Even Irzerp felt his diplomatic mask slip, his chromatophores flashing patterns of incredulity. The human twisted the cap off the water bottle and took a long drink before continuing. I honestly don't know how the fuck your intelligence services missed this, but for the past 6 days, the same 6 days that war has been looming on the horizon, we just hit a milestone. It's the first time in 2 centuries that humanity hasn't fired a single missile at ourselves. The statement hung in the air like a tangible presence. Irzerp blinked, his eyelids sweeping across his vision as his brain tried to process what he'd just heard. The human laughed and retook his seat. No wars about religion happening right now. No territorial disputes. No country or planet invading each other. Complete radio silence on the internal conflict front. He leaned forward, his eyes locking onto Irzerp's. But our military-industrial complex? It's operating at 180% of normal output. And that's just the facilities I know about. The classified ones? I'd bet my career they're running even hotter. Irzerp exchanged a glance with his technicians. Lahirp's face had gone pale, his black spots standing out starkly against the lightened green of his skin. Trodap's gills were working overtime, processing the oxygen in rapid, shallow breaths.
This is...
Irzerp began, then paused, carefully controlling his voice.
This is quite the claim you are making, Ambassador. Before we can proceed with this discussion, I need some certainty that what you are telling me is actually true.
He turned to his technicians.
Can you verify this?
Lahirp's hands were already moving, pulling a mobile data slate from the satchel at his side. He placed it on the table with a soft click, and immediately the device activated. A 3D interface bloomed into existence above the slate's surface, particles of light coalescing into recognizable data structures, streams of information rendered in colors that the human probably couldn't fully appreciate, given their species' limited visual spectrum.
On it, Ambassador,
Lahirp said as he manipulated the data streams. Irzerp watched his technicians work, recognizing the telltale signs of deep system access. They were connecting to the Central Intelligence Network, the vast repository of information that the Vlorb government had spent decades compiling about humanity. public broadcasts, intercepted communications, reports from field agents embedded in human territories, data harvested by stealth observation ships that humanity had supposedly never detected. It was all there, petabytes of intelligence waiting to be analyzed. Trodap joined Leherp in manipulating the interface, his expression intensely focused. The 3D display shifted and reorganized, data clustering into patterns that told stories of human activity across dozens of worlds.
Ambassador!
Leherp said after several minutes of tense silence, his voice oddly hollow.
The human is correct. According to our monitoring data, there has been a complete cessation of internal military conflict across human factions.
His fingers pulled up specific data streams, highlighting them in the interface.
The Europa Independence Movement and the Mars Sovereignty Coalition. They've been engaged in active hostilities for the past 18 months. Missile strikes, orbital bombardments, sabotage operations. As of 6 days ago, they're in active communication, negotiating.
The Two Moons Collective and the Saturn Ring Alliance, Trodap added, his own section of the interface glowing with evidence. They've been in a state of Cold War for 3 years, with regular border skirmishes and proxy conflicts. Our field agents reported 2 days ago that they're sharing military intelligence, actually cooperating on joint defensive preparations. Trodap's face went through a rapid series of expressions. Shock, fear, calculation. Ambassador, I'm seeing evidence that suggests some of the human factions that have been in open conflict are actually coordinating their industrial output. They are indeed more united than ever. Irzerp felt something cold settle in his chest. He looked at the human ambassador, who had been watching this entire exchange with that same impassive expression. You see, the human said softly, we knew this was coming. Your intelligence operations aren't as subtle as you think they are. We've been aware of the shifting political winds in your High Council for months. And when it became clear that war was likely, humanity did something it hasn't done in a very, very long time. He paused. We united. Irzerp's mind raced, trying to reconcile this new information with everything he thought he knew about humanity.
You are suggesting that the prospect of war with us caused humanity to cease all internal conflicts?
Not suggesting, the human corrected, stating as fact. The threat you represent gave us a common enemy, a reason to put aside our differences. He took another drink of water. Ambassador Irzerp, I know this is difficult to believe, but everything we've been doing, all the diplomatic overtures, all the attempts at negotiation, all the concessions we've offered, it's been to protect you. Because if your High Council declares war, if your fleets cross into human space and attack one of our worlds, what comes next won't be a war. It will be an extermination. Irzerp felt his gills flutter involuntarily.
You expect me to believe that humanity is trying to protect us? That all your diplomatic maneuvering has been motivated by, what, compassion?
Not compassion, the human said. Pragmatism. And maybe a little bit of guilt over what we'd have to do to you. His expression hardened. But mostly, we're trying to avoid the inevitable outcome of a conflict you cannot win.
You're afraid,
Irzerp said, his voice taking on an accusatory edge.
Everything you've shown us only proves that humanity is afraid of the Vlorb. So afraid that you've forgotten your own conflicts, buried your own disputes, all because you're terrified of having to face us in open combat.
The human ambassador laughed, actually laughed, the sound echoing in the small room. You think we're afraid? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a human data pad, sliding it across the table. The device was primitive by Vlorb standards, no elegant 3D interface, no multispectral display, but Irzerp had to admit that the refresh rate was impressive, matching humanity's notably acute visual perception. The human tapped the screen and an image appeared. It took Urzurp a moment to recognize it as a simulation, a strategic projection of total warfare between the Vlorb sovereignty and humanity. The simulation played out immediately. It showed human forces engaging not with invasion fleets, not with armies or ground forces, but with something far more terrifying. FTL-capable missiles launched from positions deep in human space, crossing vast distances in minutes. Stealth ships that the Vlorb sensors couldn't detect until they were already in position, releasing payloads that fell toward population centers and military installations alike. The simulation showed every Vlorb world under bombardment simultaneously, orbital defenses overwhelmed, planetary shields collapsing under sustained assault, infrastructure targets vaporized, military installations reduced to molten craters. The entire conflict lasted 30 minutes from first contact to total Vlorb annihilation. "Tell me," the human said quietly, "what's the accuracy of this simulation?" Urzurp stared at the display, his mind refusing to accept what his eyes were showing.
This is propaganda,
He said, but his voice lacked conviction.
psychological warfare.
"Verify it," the human said simply. Urzurp turned to his technicians, his facial patterns demanding immediate compliance. Laherp's hands were already moving through the interface, pulling up Vlorb military data, matching it against the human simulation. Trodap joined him, his expression one of growing horror.
I can't believe they just gave us this data.
Trodap muttered.
Their arsenal specifications, their logistics networks, their strike capabilities. It's all here, completely transparent.
"The data structure matches our own intelligence gathering," Laherp added, his voice distant. "This isn't fabricated. At least, not in any way I can detect." His fingers moved faster through the interface, cross-referencing, calculating, projecting. Minutes passed. Finally, they both froze.
Report!
Urzurp demanded. Laherp turned to face him, and for the first time in their 15 years of working together, Urzurp saw a genuine fear in his colleague's eyes.
This simulation is accurate, Ambassador. We've cross-referenced it against every military asset we know about, every defensive capability, every strategic resource. The timeline is conservative, if anything.
"We even factored in our hidden assets," Trodap added. "The stealth stations, the classified weapon systems, the reserve fleets that humanity's intelligence services haven't discovered yet. We ran the simulation with all of that included." His gills fluttered rapidly. "It changes the outcome from 30 minutes to approximately 50 minutes. That's all." Urzurp felt the weight of that statement settle over him like a physical burden. He looked at the human ambassador, seeing him now with entirely different eyes. The human leaned forward, his expression grave. "You need to understand something fundamental about humanity, Ambassador. We don't fight wars the way you do. We don't fight for honor or glory or to establish our place in some warrior hierarchy. Those concepts exist in our history books, but they died out centuries ago." He stood, beginning to pace the small room. "The wars we fight amongst ourselves, they're constrained by mutually agreed upon rules of engagement. We have treaties, conventions, unwritten understandings about what weapons are permissible and what targets are acceptable. Our most devastating weapons exist purely as deterrents. We threaten each other with them, but we never actually use them because we all share the same basic cultural framework. We understand each other's limits." The human stopped pacing, turning to face Urzurp directly. "But you, an external threat? Those constraints don't apply. There's no shared cultural framework, no mutually understood rules of engagement, no gentlemen's agreements about proportional response." His voice hardened. "If your High Council declares war, if your fleets attack a human world, they won't be declaring a war. They'll be initiating their own extinction event. You see, the problem is that your species and mine speak fundamentally different languages when it comes to warfare.
The human continued. Your people fight for status, for recognition among the galactic community, for honor and glory and a place in the warrior pantheon. You launch campaigns, you engage in battles, you win or lose based on tactical superiority and strategic brilliance. You engage in battles, you win or lose based on tactical superiority and strategic brilliance. It's all very civilized, in its way. He picked up the data pad, looking at the simulation still frozen on its screen. Humanity doesn't do that anymore. We stopped fighting civilized wars about the same time we figured out how to split the atom. Now, when we fight to win. Quickly, decisively, permanently. He set the pad back down. First strike doctrine isn't just a military strategy for us. It's a philosophy. Whoever strikes first and hardest usually wins. That's how we think. The human returned to his seat, his eyes never leaving Irzerp's face. Your High Council looks at humanity's lack of presence in the top 10 warrior species rankings and sees weakness. They assume we're not there because we're not powerful enough, not skilled enough, not fierce enough to compete with the established martial races. He shook his head slowly. They're wrong. We're not on that list because we don't play by those rules anymore. We don't fight duels for honor. We don't engage in limited wars for territorial disputes. We don't wage war campaigns for glory. When humanity goes to war, we target every military installation simultaneously. We destroy your ability to wage war before you fully realize you're under attack. We eliminate your orbital infrastructure, your communications networks, your command and control systems. We make it impossible for you to coordinate a response, let alone mount a counteroffensive. His voice dropped lower. And we do all of this from positions you can't see, with weapons you can't intercept, at speeds your defensive systems weren't designed to counter. Your species would be very much fucked, the human said bluntly, not because you're weak or cowardly or incompetent, but because you'd be fighting a war you understand against an enemy that stopped fighting that kind of war 300 years ago. It would be like bringing swords to a nuclear exchange. The silence that followed was absolute. Irzerp sat frozen, his mind processing the implications of everything he'd just heard. His entire worldview was reorganizing itself, pieces clicking into place with horrible clarity. The humans weren't cowards. They were apex predators wearing the mask of diplomats, desperately trying to prevent themselves from doing what their nature demanded when threatened. Every concession, every diplomatic overture, every attempt at peaceful negotiation. It had all been humanity trying to save the Vlorb from a fate the Vlorb couldn't even properly conceptualize. Irzerp thought of High Council Blarir and his grand speeches about claiming humanity's territories. He thought of Zax and the warriors of the North, eager to add another conquest to their glorious history. He thought of the entire High Council, convinced that humanity's diplomatic efforts were evidence of weakness rather than restraint. And he realized with a cold certainty that made his gills flutter in distress that there was no way he could convince them otherwise. The narrative was too entrenched, the momentum too strong, the cultural framework too alien. His people would see the human warnings as bluffs, the human restraint as fear, the human attempts at peace as confirmation of their own martial superiority. They would declare war, and they would be destroyed for it. Lahirp and Trodap were staring at him, their faces cycling through patterns of panic and desperation.
Ambassador,
Lahirp said, his voice cracking slightly.
What are we going to do?
Irzerp sat in silence, his mind working through scenarios, calculating possibilities, discarding options as quickly as they occurred to him. Minutes passed. The human ambassador waited, patient and still. Finally, Irzerp spoke, his voice heavy with a regret so profound it felt like a physical weight.
There is a single solution to this problem.
He met the human's eyes.
And I hate it.
The bridge of the human destroyer Relentless Fury was nothing like the command center Zerzurp was familiar with. Where Vlorb military vessels favored open spaces, flowing water features, and the soft bioluminescence of their aquatic heritage, human ships were utilitarian to the point of severity. Metal surfaces, harsh lighting, and banks of displays showing real-time tactical data. Zerzurp stood near the aft section of the bridge, Laherp and Trodap flanking him like guards, or perhaps like fellow prisoners awaiting execution. Through the forward viewport, Zerzurp could see his homeworld turning slowly beneath them. Vlorba 1, jewel of the sovereignty, its oceans glittering in the light of their sun. The homeworld he was about to betray. Captain Aurelian Deschamps commanded the bridge. He was older than the human ambassador they had met, his hair shot through with gray, his face marked by the kind of lines that came from decades of command decisions. Around him, the bridge crew moved quickly, but followed a clear order.
Lieutenant Beaumont, confirm targeting solutions for the primary installations,
Deschamps ordered.
Targeting solutions confirmed, Captain, responded a woman at the weapons console. All primary targets locked. Standing by for final authorization.
Tactical, status of stealth deployment?
Stealth ships are in position, Captain, came the reply from a young man at the tactical station. Awaiting your order to commence operations. Deschamps turned to face Zerzurp, his expression professionally neutral but not unkind.
Ambassador Zerzurp, we are ready to begin, but I need you to understand what's about to happen. Once we initiate this operation, there's no taking it back. Your government will know you were involved. Your people will consider you a traitor. Are you certain this is the path you want to take?
Zerzurp felt his gills flutter. Behind him, he could sense Laherp and Trodap's distress. Their facial patterns would be showing the same anguish he felt in his own chest. But he thought of the simulation, of the 30-minute war that would end with every Vlorb world reduced to ash, and he knew there was no other choice.
I am certain,
Zerzurp said, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him.
Proceed with your mission, Captain.
Deschamps pulled up a holographic display showing the geography of Vlorba.
We need current intelligence on military installations. Our surveillance data is good, but I need confirmation from someone with direct knowledge. Starting with the northern reaches, the fortress complex where Zax's warriors are stationed. Can you confirm the defensive capabilities?
Zerzurp stepped closer to the display, his trained eye picking out details.
The primary fortress has orbital defense batteries here, here, and here,
he said, indicating positions on the map.
Shield generators are located underground, but the power conduits are vulnerable at these junction points.
How many personnel? Asked Lieutenant Beaumont.
Approximately 50,000 warriors,
Zerzurp replied, each word feeling like a betrayal.
Plus support staff. The complex includes training facilities, weapons manufacturing, and strategic command centers.
What about the industrial sectors?
Deschamps asked, shifting the display.
Our intelligence suggests major weapons fabrication facilities in the Meridian Belt.
Trodap stepped forward, his voice hollow.
I worked in those facilities before joining the intelligence service. The primary antimatter containment is here.
He pointed.
If you breach that, the whole place becomes uninhabitable. But there are secondary production centers, smaller but still operational, at these locations.
Laherp pulled up data on his own slate, interfacing it with the human systems.
The communications array that coordinates fleet movements is stationed here, in geosynchronous orbit. It's defended, but if you disable it, you cut off coordination between the surface and the orbital defense network.
For the next hour, they continued this grim work. Zerzurp provided information on command centers, strategic installations, military leadership locations. Laherp detailed defense systems, communication networks, intelligence gathering facilities. Trodap outlined industrial targets, resource storage, logistical hubs. Each piece of information felt like cutting away a piece of his own soul. They were giving the humans everything needed to cripple the Vlorb sovereignty's ability to wage war. They were condemning themselves to be remembered as traitors, betrayers of their own kind, collaborators with the enemy. But they were also saving their species from extinction.
That is enough, Captain Deschamps finally said. Thank you, Ambassador. I know what this costs you.
He turned to his crew.
All stations, prepare to commence Operation Protective Custody. Lieutenant Beaumont, you may begin when ready.
Erzip found himself drawn to the forward viewport, unable to look away from his homeworld. Larhip and Trodap joined him, the three of them standing in silence as the operation began. The first signs were subtle, bright flashes along the northern continent as precision strikes took out the orbital defense batteries. Then more flashes across the industrial sectors as key facilities were neutralized. Erzip watched as the communications array exploded in a brief, brilliant flare, its debris scattering into decaying orbits. He could imagine the chaos on the ground, alarms blaring, commanders scrambling to understand what was happening, warriors rushing to defensive positions only to find their weapons disabled, their shields offline, their communication networks severed. The carefully maintained military infrastructure that the sovereignty had built over centuries was being dismantled in a matter of minutes. There was no invasion, no occupation, just precise, devastating strikes that eliminated the sovereignty's capacity for offensive operations while minimizing casualties. The humans weren't trying to conquer, they were trying to save. Erzip felt Larhip's hand on his shoulder, a gesture of solidarity that somehow made everything worse. They stood together, watching their homeworld's defenses crumble, knowing that they had made this possible, knowing that history would judge them as traitors even as they saved millions of lives.
The fortress complex has surrendered, Lieutenant Beaumont reported. Ground forces are standing down across the northern hemisphere. Southern industrial sector signaling surrender, added Ensign Rousseau. Minimal casualties reported.
One by one, the reports came in. Surrender, capitulation, submission. The Vlorb sovereignty's military might, which had seemed so formidable just days ago, was being systematically neutralized without a single human soldier setting foot on Vlorb soil. Erzip thought of High Counselor Blurier and wondered if the man finally understood. He thought of Zax and the warriors of the north, and imagined their humiliation at being defeated without even the dignity of battle. He thought of his own family, his mate, his offspring, his siblings, and wondered if they would ever forgive him for what he'd done. Probably not. Almost certainly not. But they would be alive to hate him, and that would have to be enough.
Ambassador Erzip,
Captain Deschamps said quietly, approaching the viewport.
The operation is complete. Vlorba has surrendered. We are receiving surrender signals from other sovereignty worlds as well. It's over.
Erzip nodded slowly, unable to form words.
There's something else you should know,
Deschamps continued.
We extracted your families 3 hours ago, before the operation began. They're already en route to Earth, where they'll be kept safe, as we agreed.
Erzip turned to face the captain, surprise breaking through his numbness.
They're safe?
Safe, Deschamps confirmed. We gave you our word. They're being well cared for, and they'll be waiting for you when you arrive.
His expression softened slightly.
I know this doesn't make what you've done any easier, but you've saved your species today, Ambassador. That has to count for something.
Erzip looked back at the viewport, at his homeworld, now pacified and disarmed.
History will not remember it that way, Captain. History will remember me as a traitor who helped the enemy destroy his own people's military might.
Then history will be wrong,
Deschamps said simply.
and those of us who know the truth will remember you as the man who prevented a genocide.
4 months later, Erzip stood in front of a modest dwelling in what humans called the Pacific Northwest region of Earth. The architecture was strange to his eyes, all straight lines and right angles, so different from the flowing organic structures of Vlorb design. But it was clean, well-maintained, and situated in a quiet area with pleasant vegetation and the distant sound of ocean waves. It was home now, or it would be. Larhip and Trodap stood with him, the three of them united in exile. They had been given refugee status, their families granted sanctuary on Earth in exchange for the intelligence they had provided and the cooperation they had shown.
Did you see the latest reports from the Sovereignty?
Larhip asked, his facial patterns showing a mixture of emotions too complex to parse.
They completed the disarmament ahead of schedule. Every world is in compliance with the treaty terms.
The High Council has been dissolved,
Trodap added.
replaced with a provisional government that's focused on economic development rather than military expansion.
Everything changed so quickly,
Irzerp mused.
We spent years watching the momentum build toward war, convinced it was inevitable. And then it was over in a matter of hours. Because humanity strikes fast.
Larhip said softly.
First and hardest, just like they told us.
Irzerp nodded.
They fought a war to prevent a war. Crippled us just enough to stop the madness. But no more than necessary.
He thought about the human ambassador, about Captain Deschamps, about all the humans who had worked so hard to avoid what their nature would have made so easy.
They really were trying to protect us.
A vehicle approached, one of those ground-based transports humans seemed to favor, despite having perfectly functional flight technology. It came to a stop in front of their dwelling, and Irzerp's breath caught as he saw familiar faces through the windows. His mate, Sherlp, emerged first, her facial patterns showing confusion and relief. Their offspring followed, young Turlp and adolescent Curlp, both looking around at the alien landscape with wide eyes. Then his brother, Merlp, his sister Vorp, her mate and their children. They were all here, all safe, all alive.
Irzerp?
Sherlp's voice carried across the distance, tentative and uncertain. He moved toward her, his gills fluttering with emotions he couldn't quite name.
I'm here,
He said.
We're all here.
She was scared and angry. He could see it. Those were the only words they would exchange for a while, and that was enough. They had prevented a war by understanding it. They had saved their people by betraying them. They had paid the price of treason to purchase the currency of survival. And standing here, under an alien sky, surrounded by his family and the fellow traitors who would become his closest allies, Irzerp found he had no regrets. The future was uncertain. Their names would live in infamy, but they were alive to face that future, and their people, all their people, human and Vlorb alike, had been given a chance to learn a better way. That would have to be enough. It was enough.